She thought her marriage was perfect, until her billionaire CEO husband proved her wrong. "You were supposed to be my partner, Daniel, not my life's greatest disappointment." The words hung in the air between them, sharp as broken glass. Madison Turner stood in their living room, her posture straight, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. The investigator's report lay open on the coffee table between them. Daniel Turner, billionaire CEO of Vertex Innovations, stared at his wife with an expression she'd never seen before: fear. For the first time in their 12-year marriage, the man who controlled boardrooms and commanded industries looked genuinely afraid. "Madison, please," he said, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that had once made her feel like the only woman in the world. "This isn't what it looks like." She laughed then, a sound devoid of humor. "Isn't it? Because what it looks like is that while I was building a life with you, you were building a network of mistresses. What it looks like is that the man I trusted most has been lying to my face for years. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were living a double life? Have you ever wondered how you could miss the signs that were right in front of you? If you've ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet when someone you loved betrayed you, this story will resonate deep in your soul. If you believe that true love should be built on honesty, not deception, give this video a like. And if you want to see how Madison transforms her devastating discovery into unexpected strength, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. I'm Mr. Harrison, and today I'm sharing the remarkable story of how one woman discovered her picture-perfect marriage was built on lies, and how she found the courage to walk away from the man who had everything except integrity. 12 years earlier, Madison Bennett had been arranging artwork at the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala. As the museum's youngest curator, she'd been tasked with selecting pieces that would inspire generous bidding. Her careful selections had paid off. The auction was already exceeding expectations. "That one?" a deep voice said from behind her. "Tell me about it." She turned to find herself looking up at a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit. His dark eyes focused on a contemporary piece she'd personally championed for inclusion. "It's by an emerging artist from Seattle," she explained, slipping into her professional voice. "What draws you to it?" "The contrast," he replied without hesitation. "There's both shadow and light, struggle and hope. Feels honest." Something in his observation made her look at him more carefully. Most attendees at these events spoke about investment potential or matching their decor. This man was actually seeing the art. "I'm Daniel Turner," he said, extending his hand. "Madison Bennett," she replied, accepting his handshake. His palm was warm against hers, the contact lingering a moment longer than necessary. "You curated this collection?" When she nodded, he smiled. "You have exceptional taste." Later that evening, Madison watched in astonishment as Daniel outbid everyone for the painting they discussed, driving the price to 3 times its estimated value. But what happened next surprised her even more. Instead of claiming his prize, Daniel announced he was donating the artwork back to the Children's Hospital. "Art shouldn't just be locked away in private collections," he told the applauding crowd. "It should inspire those who need inspiration most." After the auction concluded, he found her again. "Most people look at art as an investment," she said, genuinely curious about his motives. "You seem to see it as something more." "I see beauty where it exists," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "And right now, I'm looking at the most beautiful masterpiece in this room." It was the kind of line that should have made her roll her eyes. Instead, it made her blush, because when Daniel said it, somehow it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded like a truth he couldn't keep to himself. Their courtship unfolded like a dream. Daniel remembered everything: her favorite flowers, peonies, not roses, how she took her coffee, 1 sugar, splash of almond milk, the name of her childhood dog, Rusty, and the book that had changed her life, The Alchemist. He listened when she spoke, really listened, in a way that made her feel truly seen. "I've dated men who hear me but don't listen," she told her sister after their 5th date. "Daniel actually remembers what I say. He asks follow-up questions weeks later about things I mentioned in passing." "Sounds too good to be true," her sister had replied with characteristic skepticism. But Daniel proved himself again and again. When Madison mentioned a small gallery showing by an artist she admired, Daniel surprised her with tickets to the private opening. When she caught a cold, he appeared at her apartment with homemade soup and a stack of classic films. When she nervously introduced him to her parents, he charmed them completely while never overshadowing her in the conversation. 6 months after they met, Daniel took her to Santorini. They were walking along a private beach at sunset when he stopped and took both her hands in his. "I've achieved a lot in my life," he said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "Built a company, made more money than I ever dreamed possible, traveled the world. But nothing has ever felt as important as this moment right now." He dropped to one knee on the white sand, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Madison Bennett, you've shown me what it means to truly see beauty in the world. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" The ring was perfect, a vintage emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, exactly the kind of unique piece she would have chosen for herself. But it was the look in his eyes that made her say yes without hesitation. A look of absolute certainty, as if marrying her was the surest decision he'd ever made. Their wedding was intimate but elegant, held in the sculpture garden of the museum where they'd met. Daniel surprised her by having commissioned a piece from the same artist whose work they discussed that first night, a metal sculpture representing two separate paths merging into one. "To remind us that we were once two people with separate journeys," he explained, "who chose to walk the same path together." The early years of their marriage seemed to defy the warnings about honeymoon phases ending. Daniel's company, Vertex Innovations, was growing exponentially, but he still made Madison feel like his priority. He brought her coffee in bed each morning he was home, regardless of how early his meetings started. He left her notes in unexpected places, tucked into her book, slipped into her purse, taped to her mirror, little reminders of his love throughout her day. "How did you get so lucky?" her friends would ask, half joking, half serious. "I ask myself that every day," Madison would respond, meaning it. When Daniel's travel increased as Vertex expanded internationally, he found ways to bridge the distance. He sent her photos of interesting architecture or art installations he encountered, knowing she would appreciate the details others might miss. He called every night, sometimes just to say, "I miss the sound of your laugh." He brought back thoughtful gifts that showed he'd been thinking of her, a rare art book from London, handcrafted earrings from Barcelona, a vintage scarf from Paris. On their 5th anniversary, Daniel surprised her by arranging for her to curate a special exhibition at the museum where she now served as director. The theme was the art of love, pieces from around the world that captured different cultural perspectives on love and commitment. "You've taught me that love is the greatest art form," he told her at the opening, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. "It requires vision, dedication, and constant attention to detail." The exhibition was a tremendous success, elevating Madison's professional reputation while showcasing Daniel's support of her career. They were featured in the society pages as the perfect power couple. He the visionary tech entrepreneur, she the cultural tastemaker. But the public image never seemed to affect their private connection. At home, they remained the same Daniel and Madison who could spend hours discussing books or art or ideas, who still reached for each other's hands across the dinner table, who could communicate volumes with just a glance. When Daniel's mother was diagnosed with cancer in their 7th year of marriage, Madison watched him navigate the crisis with the same focused attention he gave everything important in his life. He flew to Chicago every weekend for 3 months, arranging for the best specialists while spending hours at his mother's bedside. "You should go with him next time," her friend Diane suggested over lunch. "He shouldn't face this alone. He asked me to stay here," Madison explained. "He says the time with me when he returns is what helps him recharge. That our home is his sanctuary." After his mother recovered, Daniel seemed even more devoted to their relationship. He initiated a no phones at dinner rule and started blocking Friday evenings as sacred couple time, regardless of business demands. "Life is too short and too precious," he told her. "I never want to take us for granted." As Vertex Innovations grew from a successful startup into a global technology leader, Daniel's schedule became increasingly demanding. Board meetings, investor presentations, international conferences, the obligations of a CEO seemed endless. Yet somehow, he still managed to be present in their marriage in ways that mattered. On nights when he worked late in his home office, Madison would bring him tea and kiss his forehead, proud of his dedication. When he missed dinners with friends because of last-minute conference calls, she defended him without question. "He's building something that will change lives," she would explain. That kind of vision requires sacrifice. What she didn't know was exactly what, or who, he was sacrificing for. The first hint that something might be amiss came during their 10th anniversary trip to the Maldives. Daniel had planned everything perfectly. A private villa over crystal waters, candlelit dinners on the beach, couples massages at sunset. But 3 days into their week-long stay, he received a call that he said couldn't wait. "It's the Singapore deal," he explained apologetically. "If I don't handle this now, months of work could collapse." Madison watched from their deck as Daniel paced the beach below, phone pressed to his ear. Something about his body language seemed off, more animated than his usual business calls, his free hand gesturing expressively as he spoke. When he returned an hour later, his explanation of the crisis seemed vague, lacking the specific details he usually shared about work challenges. But she pushed the observation aside. Daniel had earned her trust 1,000 times over. If he said it was business, it was business. A few months later, Madison noticed another small anomaly. Daniel had always been meticulous about their shared calendar, making sure they both knew each other's schedules. But increasingly, blocks of time appeared marked simply as meeting with no additional details. When she asked, he explained they were sensitive negotiations that required discretion. "The tech world is full of corporate espionage," he reminded her. "The less specific I am about certain meetings, the better." Again, it made sense. Daniel had always been careful about confidential business matters. His discretion was part of what made him such a trusted leader. If you've ever had that moment where something feels slightly off in a relationship but you can't quite put your finger on it, hit that like button. Sometimes our intuition whispers warnings long before our conscious mind is ready to hear them. And if you want to discover how Madison's story continues, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. The revelation that would shatter Madison's world came on an ordinary Tuesday in October. She had been planning a surprise for their upcoming anniversary, a private showing of an emerging artist Daniel had expressed interest in. She needed to check his schedule and his assistant was out sick. His password-protected calendar was inaccessible, but she remembered he kept a physical planner in his desk drawer as backup. The leather-bound planner was where he always kept it, second drawer on the right. As she flipped to November, a business card slipped out, a hotel in Tokyo with a woman's name and number handwritten on the back. Something about it made her pause. Daniel had just returned from Tokyo 3 weeks ago. Could be innocent, she told herself. A business contact, a potential client. But something, intuition, perhaps, made her continue looking. Between the pages marking his September trip to Paris, she found a receipt for a woman's scarf from Hermes. Madison had received no such gift. In August's section, a note in unfamiliar handwriting. Last night was worth the wait. Until Milan. Hey! Her hands trembled as she set down the planner. This had to be a misunderstanding. Daniel couldn't be unfaithful. Not the man who still looked at her like she hung the moon. Not the man who had just last week whispered, "You're still the only one who makes my heart race," as they fell asleep. She sat at his desk, trying to calm her racing thoughts. There had to be an explanation. Perhaps the scarf was for his executive assistant as a thank you gift. Maybe the note was from a business associate with poor boundaries. The hotel card could be from a conference organizer. But as she tried to rationalize each item, a memory surfaced. Daniel taking a call in the bathroom during their anniversary dinner last month. His explanation had seemed reasonable at the time, a crisis with their European servers. Now she wondered. With shaking hands, Madison began opening the desk drawers one by one. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of financial reports, she found a credit card statement from an account she didn't recognize. The charges told a damning story: dinners for two in cities where he traveled alone, jewelry purchases from boutiques in Paris and Milan, hotel charges for suites when his company already covered his accommodations. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered to the empty office. "This isn't Daniel." But the evidence suggested otherwise. The man who remembered every detail about her preferences had been equally attentive to other women's desires. The man who claimed to value honesty above all else had been living a lie. Still, she needed to be certain. Doubt and hope warred within her as she scanned the office. Her eyes landed on the bookshelf, specifically on a row of business books Daniel rarely referenced. Something about their perfect alignment seemed odd. Daniel usually left books slightly askew after reading them. She pulled out The Art of Strategic Leadership, a volume she'd never seen him open. The book felt wrong in her hands, too light. When she opened it, she discovered why. The pages had been hollowed out, creating a hiding place for a sleek black phone she'd never seen before. With trembling fingers, she pressed the power button. The screen lit up, requesting a passcode. Madison hesitated only a moment before trying the combination they used for everything the day they met. The phone unlocked immediately. What she found destroyed every last shred of doubt. Messages from women, not one, but several. Some names she recognized: a marketing executive who had attended their dinner parties, a client's wife who had complimented Madison's home while coveting her husband, even the yoga instructor Madison had recommended when Daniel complained of back pain. The messages were intimate, explicit, devastating. They revealed not just physical betrayals but emotional ones, conversations where he had shared their private struggles, mocked Madison's insecurities, complained about her neediness when she asked about his late nights. One message from someone saved simply as V. read: "Does she suspect anything? You're so good at playing the devoted husband." His response: "She sees what she wants to see. It's almost too easy." Madison sat on the floor of his office, the phone clutched in her hand, feeling as though the ground had disappeared beneath her. The man she thought she knew, the man she had built her life around, was a carefully constructed fiction. The loving gestures, the thoughtful calls, the passionate reconnections after his trips, all calculated performances designed to maintain her trust while he lived a double life. Or was it a triple life? A quadruple one? How many versions of Daniel Turner existed? She scrolled through more messages, each one another knife to her heart. In one exchange with a woman named Alessandra, Daniel had written, "I'll be free next weekend. Told I have meetings in Chicago." The usual story. Alessandra had replied, "Don't you ever feel guilty? She seems nice." His response chilled Madison to the bone. "Guilt is for people who lack vision. I've built my life exactly how I want it. O gets the husband she needs, and I get the freedom I deserve." A sound escaped her then, something between a gasp and a sob. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering to the hardwood floor. She pressed her hands to her mouth, trying to contain the scream building in her chest. How had she missed this? How had she been so completely deceived? The questions crashed through her mind like violent waves, threatening to drown her. She thought of all the times she'd defended him to friends when he missed events. All the nights she'd waited up, worried about his workload. All the times she'd felt guilty for questioning his vague explanations, telling herself she was being paranoid or unsupportive. The betrayal was total, absolute. It wasn't just their marriage vows he had broken. It was her trust, her sense of reality, her understanding of the past 12 years of her life. For a moment, she considered confronting him immediately. She imagined the scene, her righteous anger, his desperate excuses, perhaps even tears and promises to change. But something stopped her. Something in those cold, calculating messages revealed a man she didn't know at all. A man who had masterfully manipulated her for years. No, confronting him now would only give him the advantage. He would be prepared with explanations, with emotional appeals designed to confuse and disarm her. Daniel Turner, she now realized, was a skilled performer who had been playing the role of devoted husband while living as someone else entirely. She needed time. Time to process, to plan, to protect herself. With shaking hands, She took photos of the most damning messages, the credit card statements, the hotel card, and the note. She returned everything exactly as she had found it, making sure the hollowed book was perfectly aligned with its neighbors. Then she went to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bitter bile. That night, when Daniel returned home with a bouquet of peonies and a warm smile, Madison gave the performance of her life. She accepted the flowers with apparent delight, listened to his stories about his day, and even managed to laugh at his jokes, all while a scream built inside her chest, trapped behind her ribs. "You seem quiet tonight," he observed as they prepared for bed. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," she replied, avoiding his eyes. "Busy day at the museum." "Come here," he said, pulling her into an embrace that once would have comforted her but now made her skin crawl. "You work too hard." The irony of his concern was almost unbearable. As she lay beside him that night, listening to his steady breathing, Madison made her decision. She would not confront him yet. She would not give him the chance to gaslight her or manipulate her emotions. Instead, she would be strategic as he had been in betraying her. The next morning, she called her college roommate, Rebecca, now a high-powered divorce attorney, and scheduled a discreet meeting. "I need your help," Madison said when they met at a cafe across town. "And I need absolute confidentiality." Rebecca's expression grew serious as Madison shared what she had discovered. "This is extensive," she said, reviewing the photos Madison had taken. "And unfortunately not uncommon among powerful men. They compartmentalize their lives with frightening efficiency." "What should I do?" Madison asked, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. "First, we document everything. Then we develop a strategy that protects your interests." Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed Madison's hand. "And Madison, you need support beyond legal counsel. This kind of betrayal is traumatic." Following Rebecca's advice, Madison contacted a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma. She began quietly separating her finances, opening accounts in her name only and transferring her inheritance from her grandmother into a secure location. She researched private investigators and hired the best, a former FBI agent named Diana Mercer who specialized in high-profile infidelity cases. "I need irrefutable evidence," Madison told Diana during their initial consultation. "The kind that can't be explained away or dismissed." "That's what I provide," Diana assured her. "But are you certain you want to know everything? Some clients find the details difficult." "I need the truth," Madison replied firmly. "All of it." For 3 weeks, Madison lived alongside her husband, watching him perform the role of devoted partner with new awareness. Each kiss hello now felt like a mockery. Each "I love you" sounded hollow. The way he checked his phone when he thought she wasn't looking. The work emergencies that pulled him away at odd hours. The shower he always took immediately upon returning home. She noticed patterns she had previously dismissed. How he always placed his phone face down. How certain names would make him tense slightly. How he deflected questions about specific meetings with vague generalities followed by questions about her day. One evening, as they prepared for a charity gala, Madison watched Daniel adjust his tie in the mirror. He caught her gaze and smiled, that same warm, intimate smile that had once made her feel like the center of his universe. "What?" he asked, turning to face her. "Just thinking about how handsome you are," she replied, the lie bitter on her tongue. He crossed the room and kissed her forehead. "And I was just thinking how lucky I am to have you." The ease with which he delivered these loving falsehoods stunned her. Was anything real? Had it ever been? At the gala, Madison observed Daniel with new eyes. She noticed how he charmed everyone around him, each person receiving exactly the version of Daniel Turner they wanted to see. With potential investors, he was visionary and confident. With cultural figures, he was thoughtful and well-read. With the wives of business associates, he was attentive and flattering. And with Madison, he was the perfect husband, keeping his hand at the small of her back, bringing her favorite champagne without being asked, proudly introducing her to everyone as "my brilliant wife," the museum director. It was a masterful performance. So convincing that several times during the evening, Madison found herself almost doubting what she had discovered, almost believing in the man beside her rather than the evidence on her phone. The Andersons invited us to their lake house next weekend, Daniel mentioned as they drove home. I told them we'd check our schedules. Madison knew from Diana's surveillance that Daniel had already booked a flight to Miami for that weekend, supposedly for meetings that didn't exist. Sounds lovely, she replied, gazing out the window to hide her expression. Let's see how the week unfolds. If you've ever had to pretend everything was normal while your world was collapsing, hit that like button. Living with betrayal requires a special kind of strength, the strength to keep breathing when every breath hurts. And if you want to see how Madison finally confronts the man who betrayed her, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. The private investigator's report arrived on a Thursday morning while Daniel was at a breakfast meeting. Diana Mercer delivered it personally, a thick envelope containing what Madison had requested, irrefutable evidence. It's all here, Diana said, her expression professional but compassionate. Photos, hotel records, text message transcripts, even statements from a former assistant who was fired after threatening to expose his affairs. Thank you, Madison said, accepting the envelope with steady hands. Was there anything that surprised you? Diana hesitated, choosing her words carefully. In my line of work, very little surprises me anymore. But the level of compartmentalization your husband maintains is exceptional. These weren't random indiscretions. They were calculated, ongoing relationships with women in positions that benefited him professionally or socially. After Diana left, Madison sat at her kitchen table and opened the envelope. The contents were even more devastating than she had anticipated. Daniel had compartmentalized his affairs with stunning efficiency, telling each woman exactly what she wanted to hear, making each feel special and chosen while maintaining his image as a devoted husband. There was Veronica, the investment banker whose firm had provided crucial funding for Vertex's expansion into Europe. Their affair had been ongoing for nearly 3 years. There was Alessandra, the Italian tech journalist whose glowing profiles of Daniel had helped establish his reputation as a visionary leader. Their relationship had begun during a conference in Rome 4 years ago. There was Sophia, the yoga instructor Madison herself had recommended, who had been sleeping with Daniel for over a year, sometimes coming to their home for his therapy sessions, while Madison was at work. And most painfully, there was Megan, the wife of Daniel's college friend, who had sat across from Madison at dinner parties, complimenting her home and asking about her work, all while exchanging explicit messages with Daniel about their next encounter. The photographs showed Daniel in various hotels, restaurants, and even private homes with these women. The hotel records documented room charges, room service orders, spa treatments. The text messages revealed not just physical betrayals but emotional ones, conversations where Daniel had shared intimate details about his marriage, mocked Madison's insecurities, and strategized ways to maintain his deceptions. Most damning was the statement from Daniel's former executive assistant, Jessica, who had been abruptly fired last year. According to her account, she had been responsible for maintaining Daniel's personal schedule, a euphemism for coordinating his extramarital activities. When she had threatened to tell Madison after being passed over for promotion, Daniel had terminated her with a generous severance package contingent on a strict non-disclosure agreement. He told me Mrs. Turner was fragile and that learning the truth would destroy her, Jessica had stated. He said he was protecting her by keeping his other relationships separate. But it felt wrong to help him lie to her. Madison closed the file, a strange calm settling over her. The pain was still there, a vast ocean beneath the surface, but above it was something new, clarity. The man she had loved didn't exist. The marriage she had cherished was a carefully constructed illusion. And now, finally, she could see the truth. She spent the day making final preparations. She contacted Rebecca to confirm their legal strategy. She packed a small suitcase with essential items and personal mementos and delivered it to her sister's apartment. She transferred the last of her personal funds to her new accounts. And she made a dinner reservation at La Maison, Daniel's favorite restaurant. It's our anniversary next week, she told the maitre d' when she called. I'd like to surprise my husband with an early celebration. When Daniel texted that he would be home by 7, Madison replied with a message designed to please him. Wonderful. I've made a special dinner reservation. Wear the blue suit I love. At 6:30, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat in their living room, the investigators' report on the coffee table before her. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated. Her makeup was flawless, her expression composed. If this was to be the final act of their marriage, she would face it with dignity. Daniel arrived at 7:15, apologizing for his lateness as he entered. He looked handsome in the blue suit she had requested, his smile warm as he bent to kiss her cheek. You look beautiful, he said, noticing her dress. Special occasion? You could say that, she replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. Sit down, Daniel. Something in her tone made him pause. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face, an expression she had rarely seen on the man who always seemed in control. Is everything okay? He asked, lowering himself into the chair across from her. That depends on your definition of okay, she replied, sliding the report toward him. Is it okay to build a marriage on lies? Is it okay to make a fool of your wife for years? Is it okay to tell Veronica that I'm emotionally draining while telling me I'm the center of your world? The color drained from his face as he glanced at the report's cover. He didn't open it. Madison, I can explain. Don't. Her voice was steady, surprising even herself. I'm not interested in explanations or excuses. I've heard them all already in your messages to these women. How boring I've become. How I don't understand the pressures you face. How these connections are just physical or just emotional or whatever justification fits the moment. It's not what you think, he tried again, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. It's exactly what I think, Daniel. You're a liar. A skilled, dedicated liar who made an art form of betrayal. She took a sip of wine, her hand remarkably steady. The irony is, you didn't need to lie. You could have asked for an open marriage. You could have told me you weren't happy. You could have simply divorced me. Instead, you chose to live in elaborate fiction because it served your ego to have a devoted wife at home while you collected women like trophies. I do love you, he said, his voice dropping to the sincere, intimate tone that had once made her feel like the only woman in the world. Now it just sounded like another performance. No, you love having me. There's a difference. She set down her glass. My attorney will contact yours tomorrow. I've already moved my important belongings to a location you won't find. I've documented everything, including your creative accounting regarding company assets that should be part of our marital property. For the first time, she saw real fear in his eyes. Daniel Turner, master manipulator and strategic genius, had not anticipated this calm, prepared version of his wife. He had expected tears, accusations, a chance to manage her emotions as he had always done. You don't want to do this, he said, his tone hardening slightly. A divorce will be messy, public. Think about what that will do to both our reputations. Madison smiled, a genuine smile that seemed to unnerve him further. I already have, and I've decided I'd rather be known as the woman who walked away than the fool who stayed. She stood, smoothing her dress. You were supposed to be my partner, Daniel, not my life's greatest disappointment. Where are you going? He asked as she picked up her purse. Away from you, she replied simply. Permanently. As she walked toward the door, Daniel called after her, his voice losing its practiced control. Madison, wait, please. We can work through this. I'll get therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. She paused, turning to look at him one last time. The man she had loved for 12 years, the man she had believed in completely, now revealed as a stranger. That's the thing about trust, Daniel. Once it's shattered, all the king's horses and all the king's men can't put it back together again. She opened the door. Goodbye. The night air felt cleansing as she stepped outside. Her sister was waiting in a car at the end of the block, as planned. As Madison slid into the passenger seat, Her sister reached over and squeezed her hand. "You okay?" "No," Madison admitted, the composure she had maintained in front of Daniel finally cracking. "But I will be." The divorce made headlines, of course. Tech titans' marriage crashes. Serial infidelity alleged. Daniel's PR team worked overtime, spinning narratives about the pressures of success, the challenges of long-distance marriage, even hinting at Madison's emotional instability and unreasonable expectations. But Madison had anticipated this. The evidence she had gathered was comprehensive. The prenuptial agreement had loopholes her attorney exploited masterfully, and several of Daniel's paramours, feeling betrayed themselves upon discovering the extent of his deceptions, provided damning statements. The first weeks after leaving were the hardest. Madison alternated between numbness and overwhelming pain. She questioned everything: her judgment, her worth, her entire understanding of the past 12 years. Had there ever been real love between them? Had she imagined the connection she thought they shared? Had she been nothing but a convenient prop in Daniel's carefully curated life? Her therapist helped her navigate these questions, guiding her through the stages of grief that followed such profound betrayal. "You're mourning not just the loss of your marriage," Dr. Winters explained, "but the loss of your understanding of your past. It's like having your personal history rewritten without your consent." Slowly, painfully, Madison began to rebuild. She threw herself into her work at the museum, curating an exhibition on resilience in art that critics hailed as powerfully personal, and a meditation on transformation through adversity. She reconnected with friends she had neglected during her marriage, discovering that many had harbored concerns about Daniel but had kept silent out of respect for her apparent happiness. "He was so convincing," her friend Diane admitted over coffee. "The way he looked at you, the way he talked about you when you weren't there. He seemed genuinely in love. I never suspected." "Neither did I," Madison replied. "That was his greatest talent, making people believe whatever version of himself served his purposes." 3 months into the divorce proceedings, Daniel made a last attempt at reconciliation. He appeared at her office unannounced, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, his eyes shadowed with what appeared to be genuine distress. "5 minutes," he pleaded. "That's all I'm asking." Against her better judgment, Madison agreed. "I've been in therapy," he began, sitting across from her desk. "Intensive therapy. I'm beginning to understand why I did what I did, the need for validation, the fear of true intimacy, the compartmentalization I learned from my father." "I'm glad you're getting help," Madison replied, her tone professional. "But that doesn't change anything between us." "What if it could?" He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "What if I could prove to you that I've changed, that I understand what I threw away?" Madison studied him carefully. The old Daniel would have been perfectly groomed, perfectly controlled. This version, slightly rumpled, openly emotional, was new. But was it real, or just another performance tailored to what he thought would move her? "Daniel," she said finally, "even if you have changed, even if you're sincere right now, it doesn't erase what happened. You didn't make a mistake. You made thousands of deliberate choices to deceive me, day after day, year after year. You shared our private life with other women. You mocked me behind my back. You constructed an elaborate web of lies while looking me in the eye and promising honesty." "I know," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly, "and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." "Perhaps you will. But that's your journey now, not mine." She stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "I wish you healing, Daniel. I really do. But my healing requires your absence from my life." As security escorted him from the building, Madison felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, she had faced Daniel not as his wife, not as his victim, but as a woman reclaiming her own narrative. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Madison received a settlement that ensured her financial independence, though it was never about the money. What she wanted most was her freedom and dignity, both of which she reclaimed. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal, hit that like button. The journey from devastation to strength isn't easy, but it's worth every step. And if you want to see how Madison transforms her pain into purpose, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. A year after discovering the truth, Madison stood on a stage at the Waldorf Astoria, addressing the crowd gathered for the launch of the Phoenix Project, a foundation supporting survivors of relationship deception and psychological abuse. The organization would provide legal resources, therapy scholarships, and community support for those navigating the aftermath of betrayal. When I discovered my husband's double life, Madison began, her voice clear and strong, I felt as though I'd been living in a beautiful house that suddenly revealed itself to be nothing but a painted backdrop. Everything I thought was solid turned out to be an illusion. I questioned not just my marriage, but my own perception of reality. The audience listened in rapt silence as she continued. What I've learned through my journey is that betrayal of this magnitude is not just about infidelity. It's about identity theft, the theft of the identity you thought you had as part of a loving, honest partnership. It's about gaslighting, being made to question your own instincts and perceptions. And it's about the profound trauma that comes from discovering that someone you trusted completely has been systematically lying to your face. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Some nodded in recognition. Others wiped away tears. The Phoenix Project exists because I couldn't find the resources I needed when my world collapsed. I want others to have what I didn't: specialized legal guidance, trauma-informed therapy, and a community that truly understands this unique form of devastation. After her speech, as guests mingled and pledged support, a reporter from the style section of the Times approached her. Ms. Turner, or do you prefer Ms. Bennett now? The young woman asked. Bennett, Madison confirmed. She had reclaimed her maiden name as part of reclaiming herself. Ms. Bennett, your foundation is already being hailed as groundbreaking. But I have to ask, do you regret the years you spent with Daniel Turner? Madison considered the question carefully before answering. I don't regret loving completely. That's who I am. I don't even regret not seeing the signs earlier, because his deception wasn't my failure. What I've learned is that trust isn't weakness, but betrayal is. Daniel didn't break me. He revealed his own brokenness. She paused, then added with quiet confidence. I used to measure my worth by his love. Now I know better. He didn't lose someone who loved him. I lost someone who never really existed. The reporter's follow-up question was interrupted by the arrival of Diana Mercer, the private investigator who had helped Madison uncover the truth. Sorry to interrupt, Diana said, but your next appointment is here. As they walked away, Diana murmured, No appointment. You just looked like you needed rescuing. Madison laughed a genuine, unguarded sound that would have surprised her a year ago. My hero. Thank you. No need for thanks. I'm just glad to see you thriving. Diana glanced around the elegant ballroom. This is important work you're doing. I've seen too many people destroyed by the kind of betrayal you experienced. I came close, Madison admitted. There were days I didn't think I'd survive the pain. But you did more than survive, Diana observed. You transformed. Across town, in his penthouse office at Vertex Innovations headquarters, Daniel Turner watched the live stream of the foundation launch on his computer. The company had weathered the scandal of his divorce, but not without cost. Several board members had distanced themselves, concerned about the potential impact on their family-friendly brand image. A major partnership had fallen through when the female CEO made it clear she couldn't trust a man who had so thoroughly deceived his wife. Daniel closed the video window as Madison finished her speech, unable to watch any longer. The office around him felt emptier than usual, despite its impressive views and expensive furnishings. He swiveled his chair to face the wall of achievements, awards, magazine covers, framed articles hailing him as a visionary leader. None of it filled the hollow space that had opened inside him since Madison left. His phone buzzed with a message from his current girlfriend, a model 20 years his junior who was impressed by his wealth and status. Missing you. Can't wait for Aspen this weekend. He didn't reply. The thought of another weekend of shallow conversation and performative affection exhausted him. The women who had once found his married status exciting now saw him as damaged goods, or worse, as a potential meal ticket. The thrill of conquest had faded, leaving only a gnawing emptiness. He reached for his phone to text Madison, something charming and contrite that might reopen the door, but stopped himself. What could he possibly say that would undo the years of deception? What words could rebuild the trust he had so systematically destroyed? For the first time, Daniel Turner faced a problem he couldn't solve with money, charm, or strategic thinking. He had lost something irreplaceable, not just Madison, but the version of himself that existed in her eyes. The man she had believed in, had loved completely, had trusted without reservation. That man had never really existed, of course. He had been a carefully crafted persona designed to secure Madison's devotion while allowing Daniel the freedom to pursue his other desires. But sometimes, in quiet moments, Daniel had almost believed in that version of himself too. Almost felt worthy of the love she gave so generously. Now, surrounded by the trappings of success that suddenly seemed hollow, he recognized the truth. She had never been the lucky one in their relationship. He had been. And now that luck had finally run out. 6 months after the launch of the Phoenix Project, Madison received an unexpected letter. The envelope bore no return address, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. For a moment, she considered throwing it away unopened, but curiosity won out. Inside was a check for $10 million made out to the Phoenix Project, along with a brief note. Madison, this can't undo what I did, but perhaps it can help others avoid similar pain. The Foundation's work is important. You were always the best of us. She sat with the letter for a long time, emotions swirling. The donation would allow the Foundation to expand its services nationwide, helping countless people rebuild after betrayal. But accepting money from Daniel felt complicated. After careful consideration, she deposited the check. Not for Daniel's redemption, but for the good it could do. She didn't acknowledge the gift or respond to his note. Some doors were better left closed. That evening, she met her sister for dinner at a new restaurant in the Arts District. As they were being seated, Madison noticed a man at a nearby table glance her way with appreciation. He was attractive in an understated way. Intelligent eyes, kind smile, no wedding ring. That guy is definitely interested, her sister whispered as they settled at their table. Maybe, Madison replied with a small smile. But I'm not ready yet. Will you ever be? Her sister asked gently. It's been almost 2 years. Madison considered the question. I'm not closed to the possibility of love. But next time, if there is a next time, I'll go in with open eyes. I'll trust, but I'll also pay attention to actions rather than words. I'll love completely, but not at the expense of my own truth. That sounds healthy, her sister approved. And in the meantime? In the meantime, I'm building a life that feels authentic. The museum, the foundation, reconnecting with myself. It's enough for now. Madison raised her glass. To becoming the author of my own story, not a character in someone else's. As they clinked glasses, Madison felt a sense of peace wash over her. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. Perhaps it never would. But it had transformed into something else. Something that gave her work meaning and her life new purpose. 3 years after discovering Daniel's betrayal, Madison Bennett stood in the gallery of her museum, surveying the final preparations for her most personal exhibition yet. Reconstruction. Art after devastation. The show featured works by artists who had transformed personal tragedy into creative rebirth. Paintings, sculptures, and installations that spoke to the human capacity for resilience. As she adjusted the lighting on a particularly powerful piece, her assistant approached with an envelope. This just arrived for you. Messenger said it was important. Inside was an invitation to the Tech Innovation Awards, where Daniel was being honored for lifetime achievement. A handwritten note on the invitation read, "Your presence would mean a great deal," and Madison slipped the invitation back into its envelope. Daniel still didn't understand. He still believed that grand gestures and public appearances could somehow rewrite their history. He still saw her as an accessory to his narrative rather than the author of her own. She handed the envelope back to her assistant. "Please send our regrets." I have a prior commitment that evening. That commitment was to herself, to the boundaries she had established, to the peace she had fought so hard to achieve, to the truth she now honored above all else. Later that week, Madison gave an interview to a women's magazine about the exhibition and the Phoenix Project's ongoing work. The conversation eventually turned personal. After everything you've been through, the interviewer asked, "What would you say to women who are afraid to trust again?" Madison thought carefully before answering. "I would say that trust is still worth the risk. Not blind trust. Not trust that ignores red flags or silences your intuition. But the kind of trust that begins with trusting yourself first, your perceptions, your boundaries, your worth." "And what about forgiveness?" the interviewer pressed. "Have you forgiven Daniel Turner?" "Forgiveness isn't a single decision. It's a process," Madison replied. "I've forgiven him enough to wish him well from a distance. I've forgiven him enough to not let anger consume me. But I've also forgiven myself for loving someone who wasn't who he pretended to be. That was perhaps the harder forgiveness to achieve." The article, published the following month, resonated deeply with readers. Madison received hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Each one reinforced her conviction that bringing these experiences into the light was essential, that the shame belonged not to those who had been deceived, but to those who had chosen deception. On the 5th anniversary of her divorce, Madison took herself to Santorini, reclaiming the place where Daniel had proposed, transforming it from a site of illusion to one of authentic joy. She stayed in a small villa overlooking the caldera, spent her days exploring the island at her own pace, and filled her evenings with good books and better wine. On her last night there, she sat on her terrace watching the legendary sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Saw this and thought of you." Attached was a news article announcing Daniel Turner's resignation as CEO of Vertex Innovations following a vote of no confidence from the board. The article cited personal issues and leadership concerns as factors in the decision. Madison set her phone aside without responding. Daniel's rise or fall no longer affected her life. She had built something new, something true, something entirely her own. As darkness fell over the Aegean, Madison lifted her glass in a silent toast, not to the past she had lost, but to the future she had claimed. The path hadn't been easy. The pain had been real and devastating. But through it all, she had discovered a fundamental truth. Sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of something far more authentic and beautiful than you ever imagined possible. If the story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear that betrayal doesn't define them. Subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories of resilience, transformation, and authentic love. Remember that your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see it. And sometimes the greatest love story you'll ever experience is the one where you finally, completely love yourself. In the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? What helped you find your strength again? Your stories matter, and this community is here to support your journey, wherever you may be on the path from heartbreak to healing. Until next time, this is Mr. Harrison.